Detours. Brought to you by Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. When two-time silver medalist Corey Puterbaugh retired from rugby after Tokyo, Team USA was left with a huge offensive hole to fill. All the while, Sarah Adam was learning from each step up the ladder, soaking up information like a sponge, and had her opportunity come in Paris just a month ago where she became the silver medalist herself. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sarah, boy, it's been 2 years since you and I spoke last, and a whole lot of waters moved underneath that bridge. 2 years ago, you were hoping just maybe to make it to the squad, but you had to work really hard. Nothing taken for granted. You really did have to plug away. You had to go from tournament to tournament and really work to get to this level.
Yeah, it's wild because now that you say that was only 2 years ago, it feels like it was just yesterday, but also feels like a lifetime ago that we had that conversation together. So much has happened in building, the team and rebuilding the team, in all the competitions and learning and growth, and my role changing within the team, even my classification changing. And it's so much in the last 2 years. It's been quite the whirlwind. And yet it feels like only yesterday that you and I were talking and I had just made Team USA. So an absolute wild ride.
Speaking of expectation, just overall, give us a broad generalization of what it was your experience was like in Paris. Was everything that did it live up to par? Was it above expectation? What was the whole experience like?
It was absolutely above expectation. I think we didn't honestly know what to expect because in Tokyo with the 2020 games being what they were with COVID and, there's a little bit of a dip in people watching it and really attending it, and then it just came back full force. Paris was amazing with the turnout. Every stadium was packed. We wanted to go watch wheelchair basketball, and it was hard to even get tickets because it was sold out. And we're like, what an awesome problem to have is that we can't get into wheelchair basketball. Don't worry, we snuck in. But it was so loud. The atmosphere was amazing. The support was amazing. Whether we're talking in Paris live or even from back home, the access to watching our games, highlighting on social media, the Paralympic movement getting attention was beyond our wildest imagination. We hope it continues leading into LA, and that's certainly our expectation.
Yeah, no, it's just really crazy how well rugby is done. When you think back that 96 was the first times that the Paralympics were recognizing rugby. And now here you are, just a few decades later, and the sport is blown up. It's probably literally amongst the top. It is amongst the top three: racing, rugby, basketball. You guys are right there.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting sport to watch. Whether you really know the ins and outs of it or you're just new to watching it, it's exciting, it's fun, it's fast paced, and people latched onto it. We're excited about that.
When I was looking back at that interview from a couple of years ago, it dawned on me how the strange ironies and the twists and turns of life. You're in OT school and you're actually volunteering at rugby matches, and now suddenly you're playing rugby on the highest level. How strange is that?
A lot of things in my life feel like they're just kind of fortuitous. They fell into my lap at the right time, able to capitalize on those moments. But certainly, looking back 10 years ago, getting introduced to rugby, wheelchair rugby as an able body, as a volunteer, and never in my wildest dreams thinking that I'd be competing, let alone competing for Team USA. But, here I am and just excited to embrace the moment.
Yeah, no kidding. You did more than participate. You were a real warrior. I watched some of what you did out there, and we're going to get into that a little bit, but let's go ahead and set the tournament. USA, first time out of the blocks, you guys go up against Canada. And it's a pretty close game, 51-48. It's tight, but still doable. Round two, you go up against Japan. Your first loss, 45-42. Round three, Germany, 57-47. And then ultimately, Japan comes back, beats Australia, who ends up getting the bronze medal, 52-51. So they gave them everything that they could handle. You guys go on to beat GB, the defending champs, 50-43. So there were a lot of little intangible things that were happening within the tournament for you guys to even get to the gold medal game.
We talked a lot about previously, there's been a lot of close matches in rugby. When you look back to Tokyo, you look back to Rio, there are a lot more overtimes and games that are being won by 1 point or one try. And I don't think that was as much of the case, at least on our side of the bracket, for Paris. There was a lot of those, winning by 4, 5, 6. I think it was really that mental game. We said all of these teams are phenomenal, phenomenal teams. Everybody had a chance to win gold. It was just who could keep it together, who could stay to the game plan, who wasn't going to get discouraged, who was going to grind through the highs and lows of each and every game of the 5 games in 5 days. And I think at the end there, you could really see it with us. We came out with Japan a great first quarter in the gold medal match. We're hanging in there for the second and third, but they just hung on better. They remained with that really grit that you needed to survive the competition in the way that it was built. And I think you saw us have a little bit of a drop off there at the end.
Yeah, and as long as you went there, not that we want to get all nerdy as Coach Delagrave would like to say. He said, I interviewed him. He said he'd like to get really nerdy. I'm like, hey man, well we can do that one day. But we're talking about the sport. So
Yeah.
first quarter 14-11. It's nice. Things are looking sunny. Then it's 24-23. 35-32, and into the fourth, that's when it just blew up. You guys, I have to say, as I looked at it, I can't question Coach Delagrave. He knows a whole lot more about rugby than me, but I'm sort of wondering, are you and Chuck just getting gassed? You looked really tired. You were hunkered over.
Yeah, I think it's hard to deny that. I think everybody could see that, that it was taking us, harder to recover. Japan had a very deep bench that they could rely on. That was really helpful. And we had some great players on our bench as well, as just kind of the strategy of the matchups of who on our bench matched up well against the Japan bench. And I think, the players that were on the court were the ones that made the most sense for us. But it did result in a bit of a drop off. The Japanese low pointers are just so strong, and trying to get through them and around them the entire game. It did lead to a drop off. And for me, with multiple sclerosis, it's hard for me to refill that tank once I've kind of dropped off the cliff. And that's what happened sometime halfway through the third quarter. So,
Sarah, boy, now that you brought up MS, we might as well go ahead and talk about that and get that out of the way. You had said openly, and you have spoken openly many times about dealing with MS. We all know that, well, many of us know that it's progressive. Things will happen. You don't know exactly the pace it will happen, but you said, this might be my only opportunity, and I want to leave it all out on the floor. Did you leave it out on the floor?
I did. When I'm looking back, obviously it's disappointing to come home with a silver medal. But I've watched the games. I've watched them a couple times, and when I look at my performance, it's something I'm still very proud of. And thinking of everything that I pushed through, grinding day in and day out for the training and building relationships with my teammates and learning the ins and outs of rugby. And this is only my third year realistically playing. And so I think I put my heart on. Joe Delagrave constantly tells us, like, put your heart on the line, on that court, for yourself, for your teammates, put everything you have. And I felt like I really did that, despite some of the external pressures, despite it being my first game, despite a lot of limiting factors. I'm proud of what I was able to put on the court.
Just a couple quick stats on you. So you played 25 minutes and had 13 tries against GB, defending champs. And then you played 24 minutes and had 14 tries against Japan. So you had a lot of playing time out on the court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was out there a lot. I think we've got a wonderful lineup there with Chuck, Josh Wheeler, myself, and Jeff Butler. A lot of potential in that lineup, as well as some of our others with, if it's Chuck, myself, Mason, and Lee or Butler. There's just a lot of lines that I gelled with, and the chemistry, and it just kind of like worked and fit in with those lines well. And I have a favorable classification to be able to do that and be on the court. But it comes with having to navigate the MS and having to navigate keeping the endurance up and the intensity up and the mental game when you don't have as many breaks. And I think, even more so for Chuck, who never gets off the court, never gets a chance to breathe and process and watch the game and see where the adjustments need to be made and see what we could be doing differently. He doesn't get that opportunity because he's never off the court. So it certainly makes it a little bit tougher.
Yeah, I asked Coach Delagrave about that, and I basically asked him, would it be the equivalent of pulling Tom Brady out of the Super Bowl? And he pretty much, that maybe it's a strange analogy, but Chuck is the Tom Brady of rugby. So how do you, whether the guy is just completely exhausted or not, how do you say to the guy, hey, go sit on the bench? You just can't.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely have to keep him on the court. He is our superstar. He makes a lot of what we do work. A phenomenal, not only physical player but intelligent player. I don't know that you'd be hard pressed to find somebody smarter on the court than Chuck Aoki, and he really makes things work. And so my goal, being his teammate and in my lines, is to at my in my own way, at my own level, be that same contribution of like, when Sarah's on the court, these lines work.
With you guys up in the 3.0s and 3.5s, or 3.0 categories, you're really responsible a lot for ball handling. Do you think that Japan, well, no, it's obvious that Japan isolated on you and Chuck. They worked you guys to death. They were doubling up on you and working. You and Chuck just were exhausted.
I think it's a lot of team strategies, particularly for me with my MS and Chuck, who never gets off the court. It's just like, if we can just grind them down. And our other teammates did a phenomenal job, though, of stepping up. Wheeler, Butler, Mason, you name it, stepped up and carried the load when they could. And that's what our team counted on. But at the end of the day, just wasn't quite enough to get us through.
When I was watching the coverage, I was actually pretty impressed with Mark Zupan. He did a really nice job explaining the game, and he talked a lot about what he called spreading the floor. Can you explain what that means so that people, when they're actually getting an opportunity to watch these games a little bit more critically, what does spreading the floor exactly mean?
I think any sport, there's spacing involved, whether we're talking basketball, soccer, football, us. We've got myself, Chuck Aoki, and Josh Wheeler out there. They don't know who to guard. There's only, you have to guard all of us. And for many of us, it takes two. Every single one of us probably takes two defensive players to stop us. So if we just spread out that court, they can't stop us. And we had to keep the spacing, and the other teams did a nice job of preventing us from getting the spacing that we needed to be effective on the court. They made it so that it could just take one low pointer to take me out. And that's kind of on me to do a little bit better in keeping the spacing for next time.
We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Sports and Spokes Magazine. For nearly 50 years, they've produced stories on iconic athletes performing at the top of their game, given generational coverage of sports dating back to the 1970s, and they've shown the way with exciting and timeless magazine cover shots. To stay on top of all the latest news from the world of high performance adaptive sports, go to sportsandspokes.com. Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. One of the things I noticed about your play is that while you were down there, maybe on the defensive side of the ball, and it was almost as though you sensed or have an intuition for turnovers, because wow, you were pivoting and heading back the second the ball was tipped and the U.S. got the ball back and they were feeding it out to you. Do you have a natural inclination? Do you feel like you have an intuition when you're on the floor? Is that something you learn, or is that something that you just have?
I think it's something that I have, as well as I just have a trust in my teammates. An absolute trust in what they're doing that allows me to play my role. I don't need to worry if Chuck's going to be where he needs to be. I don't need to worry if Wheeler's going to be where he needs to be. I know they are, and I know that when they are, the turnovers are going to happen. And so my role is just to funnel people to Chuck, funnel people to Wheeler, trust, and then it allows me to be where I need to be.
So this is the only time we're going to talk about the fact that there was a woman out on the floor playing rugby, because it's actually pertinent. You saved 0.5 out there on the floor. So you being technically, I guess, a 3.5, they lower your classification down to a 3.0, correct?
So I was actually reclassed. When the last time we chatted, I was a 3 playing as a 2.5. And then when I was in Paris last year, I was classified as a 2.5. So I actually play essentially as a 2.0 on the court. I play as a true midpointer, which is extremely helpful given the function that I have.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And it also, so what I see coming into play, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that as women start to get integrated to more of the squads, this is going to open up a real opportunity for the coaching staff to see where they can mix and match those 8 points out on the floor to maximum capacity.
Which is something we do realistically with any athlete out there. That's the beauty of the Paralympics, is seeing how, and particularly with wheelchair rugby, how can I take a 0.5 with less function, not, obviously not going to be a ball handler, and say, how can I make them relevant on this floor? And I think that's the beauty of it, is to watch Jeff Butler being one of the more relevant people out there as a 0.5 in what he does, and a lot of it goes unnoticed what the low pointers do. But you can get yourself a phenomenal low pointer, and it's a game changer for a team. We need for every single player on that court has a role based a lot on their functional abilities and their classification, and making sure that you make the best of that. And I think the same thing you see with women. That yes, we get the additional 0.5 and how to use that to our advantage as a team. And Japan does that with Kai, their female low pointer, who's phenomenal. What she did, she was always in the right spaces at the right time, despite having the least amount of function on that floor. And was a game changer for them. And I was hoping to be able to do the same thing for our team.
So you take the hits, you give the hits. Give us an idea. Who's the hardest hitter that you've experienced in your time in rugby?
Oh boy, honestly, Zion Reddington, who's our own teammate, we had to teach him how to pull up a little bit. That kid can hit hard for being 18 years old. But a lot of them out there, Stu Robinson on GB and Hashimoto for Japan. They really, the trunk function, be able to put their hips into that and the weight that they have behind their hits. So for me, it was fun as the female because they're going out there thinking they're going to absolutely annihilate this female, put me on my face. But when I know that they're coming and using my brain and positioning my chair and took a couple of them out. I think I nearly took out every high pointer from every team at one point or another on the court. So I enjoy that part of it to show that women can be just as fierce. There's not a lot of us that are ball carriers as women on teams. A lot of them are more of a defensive role. And so I enjoyed being able to show that females on the court can take the high pointer role. We can give the hits. We can put the guys on their face as well.
Speaking of Zion, he's just a young kid. He's only in his teens still, but he's the 3.5. It's always a little bit difficult. The 3.5, as Joe would like to say, has to be just on the top of his game. When you're sucking up that extra 0.5 out on the court, is he going to get there? Do you see him as a student of the game? Will he be a star in the U.S. squad?
I sure hope so. We could use one. I mean, every team that's been successful has a very good 3.5 on the court that can take the ball and get past just about anybody. And Zion has the benefit of learning from Chuck, who's so smart in his play. So if you can combine the smarts with the physical ability to just push through anything and push through everyone, you've got a dynamic athlete there. And he's committed. He's got great mentorship behind him to teach him what he needs to do and how to be an elite professional athlete. So we're hoping.
Sarah, for those of us just sitting there watching it on TV, take us inside the huddle. Take us right there to Paris. Fourth quarter, game is starting to slip away. Coach Delagrave is starting to call a few more timeouts. Things are getting pretty serious. What does Joe say to you guys in the huddle?
Just stick to the game plan. You've got what you need in you. You guys need to rely on each other. We need to trust each other on the court. We need people stepping up and doing their roles and doing their jobs despite being tired. We needed the energy from the bench, and I think everybody was doing that. I think people were putting every last thing they had into those final moments and continuing to fight even when it looked like the odds were kind of stacked up against us. And that's important to me, that even till the end, you're still fighting.
Tired as you were you ready to play right to the end? I mean, that's a ridiculous question because I know you, and I think I already know that answer.
Yeah, I was. I think my regret looking back is there were certain things, given my MS, when I'm tired and when my body's not functioning the way that I'm used to it functioning, I switch my gameplay. And I'm a little bit more communicative, and my teammates switch their gameplay. And we didn't quite make that flip. It was still just relying on me to be functional out there and blow past people and not need the pick and rolls and not need some of the things that perhaps we should have been doing, given the fact that I was, or even for Chuck, like giving him the pick and roll and playing easier version of rugby than just get the ball and push through everybody, because that wears you out. Well,
I got to say, you guys had a fabulous tournament. Maybe it did get away from you, but nonetheless, you have to be very happy with the results. It was a great tournament to watch. And now you are a silver medalist, and you got to be pretty darn happy about that.
Yeah, more than anything, we're just excited to see the Paralympics growing and people falling in love with wheelchair rugby and our sport and our stories in the Paralympics. And I mean, there's just such great momentum leading into LA when it's on our home turf. I think it's going to be really exciting to be a part of that and a part of that discussion. But the support, it's hard to explain what that feeling is to have people it hasn't been very popular. It hasn't been well known besides our community of athletes and families and whatnot. So to see it being recognized and our efforts being recognized has been really, really meaningful.
And this just brings up one more question. Let's say, for the heck of it, that you can't play in 2028. Things have progressed. Do you see yourself now moving into a coaching role? Is this sport so deep into your blood now that you just can't go away from it?
Yeah, I think it's no surprise that I love coaching. That was kind of my original thought when I got introduced to rugby, wheelchair rugby, was to volunteer and do some coaching. I was a high school softball coach, so I have loved the mentorship aspect of that. I'm a teacher. I'm a professor at St. Louis University, so a lot of teaching involved in that arena. And so, yes, a huge passion for coaching. If there are opportunities, I'd love to stay involved in that aspect, but for right now, we're just taking it one step at a time and seeing where it makes the most sense for me to fit within the organization, within the team.
Well, you're a gamer, you're a warrior, and now you're a silver medalist. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.